Nice October 15th, 2019 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. And I'll start by reading the required phrase that, as required by open meeting law, you are hereby informed that the town will be video and audio taping as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. See no one interested in doing that. We'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving to weekly briefing. Chris, you want to give us an update on why we can't drive anywhere in East Harwich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two things tonight. On the sewer work on Phase 2, we did receive the weekly schedule. The weekly schedule does show for the next 3 weeks focus on one crew on 137. That pipe is anywhere between 21 to 26 feet deep, so that is going very slow, but they are making progress. So you can see, or you'll see, continued issues there on 137. On 137, it's from Stop and Shop to Cemetery Road is the primary focus of that. We do anticipate, we had a meeting at the end of last week, that work will take until the end of November. So it's going to be a slow crawl, if you would, up through that section. On Route 39, they have added a second crew to work on 39. One of the challenges for the project is you have to get to the low point and then work your way out from that. So they are working their way from Spencer's Trace to up to the 400 Plaza on Route 39. I know I had some meetings where our intent was to try to lay off and not have both roadways closed. Here, our people have specifically asked if they could get into 39. It's not as deep a cut, it's 10 to 15 feet. We were hoping that they would make about double or triple what they do on the other stretch because it's not so deep. Sometimes the best laid plans, there's 4 gas lines and a water line. So even though it's not deep, there's a lot of other utilities, which is making that a little bit of a slower go. I do intend on having a meeting at the end of the week just to kind of assess the progress. Abby Auer from the Auer Company had indicated that she would give me an update to see how they were progressing. She also did make an offer. I had gone out to see the work box on 137 to see the construction as it's happening, and she did say she would take any of the selectmen out. It's a construction site, so if anyone has any interest in seeing that, let me know, or I can give you her number, and then you can take a tour for yourself. But hard hats and safety vests are required in terms of that. And then, Mr. Chairman, maybe with your permission, I know that I've been unavailable for some meetings, and I'm sure that as I've worked in municipal government for a long time, and sometimes there's rumors and speculation. I have been going through, or my family has been going through, kind of a difficult issue involving both of my daughters. So I am attempting to work through that. I take this job very seriously, and only when family is involved do I lose time from doing my work. But family has been involved, and it's been a difficult stretch for me. It will continue to be a difficult stretch for probably a little bit longer. I will do my best to continue to serve the town of Harwich in the way that the town is used to seeing me operate. But I do ask just for, if you don't see me, it's for family considerations, and if people would just, I guess, be a little bit understanding in terms of that, I appreciate it.
And as chairman, I encourage Chris to think about his family first. And so thank you for Chris.
Thank you, Larry.
Anyone else for a weekly briefing?
Carolyn Carey, Community Center Director, and I just wanted to remind everyone that this Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Community Center is our boutique, where anyone can come in and pick out a costume. We have coloring contests going on, guess the amount of candy corn, all kinds of fun things, all free. We have received most of these costumes from the public. A lot of donations were made, so we're really, really grateful. And I just remind everyone that we will have our Halloween party on October 31st. And I cannot say enough about the individual businesses in town who have far surpassed anything I could have imagined. I think we're up around 77 pizzas, so please come and be hungry. Dairy Queen giving dilly bar, it's just been an amazing thing, so we're so, so grateful. And the last thing, through you, Mr. Chairman, we have requested to be on the agenda to go over the Seaside Marketplace at Saquatucket Marina. It's that time of year for people who do this kind of work to start looking at their schedules. So as promised, Erica and I did the first part of it. We went back. We'll make some recommendations to you, but we've asked to be on the schedule next week.
Okay.
Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Carolyn. Anyone else for weekly briefing? Erica?
Hi, good evening. Erica Stresbeck, Harwich Cultural Center. I just wanted to announce, it's a little early, but we are starting to plan for Art Week, which has been tremendously successful for the town of Harwich. I'm thrilled to share that with the May event this year, which is going to happen May 1 through 10. Harwich is actually going to be a featured case study on the Art Week website. So we should all be really thrilled with our participation last year and how we are working to expand it town-wide. Sue Darling Sullivan, who was here for Art Week last year as we kicked off the ribbon cutting ceremony for Seaside Marketplace, she'll be doing a Spark session on the 14th of November from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock in room 4 at the community center.
Spark session?
It's a
means
Spark
what?
session, so if you're thinking of, or businesses are thinking of participating in the upcoming Art Week, it's a time to ask questions, throw your ideas out to Sue, and she can guide you through how to best participate. They do open their early online registration in November, and we've really worked to get promotions online with them, and it's really served us well. We were in some magazines last year with them. Of course, we got to do the Channel 5 shout out online, so it's really served us well. So I just want to get the word out there that we're already starting to plan. So that's, again, the 14th of November at 2 o'clock.
One last question. You mentioned a website. Which website?
So that will be artweekma.org, and Harwich will be a featured case study. They're really excited to see how we as a town and how the cultural center has taken Art Week and really grown it, and how it's, you know, becoming a bigger community event for us.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Anyone else for public comment? Or, excuse me, weekly briefing, but now, Cindy, public comment, I guess. It's okay, I have a hard time distinguishing the two.
Good evening, Cindy Williams, Harwich Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to remind everyone, in case you haven't seen the orange signs around town, this week is Restaurant Week for Harwich, and we have 12 restaurants participating, so we also have the information on our website as well. And we've been doing a daily video on Facebook, too, at the different participating restaurants. So hope everyone will go out and have dinner or enjoy something at one of the restaurants.
Thank you, Cindy. Weekly briefing? Public announcements? Come on, it's
Good evening.
public announcements.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Hartman, and I'm an artist in residence at the Cultural Center. I live in Harwich Port, and I'm here tonight to talk about the Bottle Project. I'm hoping that you all received your packages talking about the project. And my goal tonight is to explain the project, answer any questions, and ask that you vote on the final installation place at the next town meeting.
Go ahead with the explanation. Since we don't have it on the agenda as an official agenda item, I'll bring it back next week for a vote.
Okay, great. Thank you.
But this will give you an idea. You can let us know what's going on and get us to that point.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So the Bottle Project is supported by a grant from the Harwich Cultural Council. the cultural center, myself, I'm the designer, and also Baskin's Ace Hardware has donated all of the paint and supplies to create this piece. And what it is, it's a project created by the community for the community, and it involves decorating, painting, cutting plastic water bottles and inserting them into a grid. Now, this particular piece has taken over 1,500 water bottles out of our recycling center and put them into a canvas. It was originally designed for school-aged children. However, it really caught on, took on a life of itself, and from the beginning of its launch, which was Art Week of last year, through the Cranberry Festival, it has virtually grown so that everybody's doing it. Adults are painting, visitors and the community. I've done the summer program, the town summer program, and the kids just loved it. And it was the same in both of the arts and crafts festivals. So it really took on a life of its own. It's received a lot of publicity from the Chronicle, from the Channel 18, and it's collectively we've shown the community that we care about our plastic disposal. And the idea being to show people that there are other ways of thinking of using your trash instead of throwing it in the dump. Because there's so many bottles, the community created the canvas. Now I step in and I create the final piece. There are two places that I have talked with the principals about placing it in its final stage. That is the Cultural Center. I've spoken with both Erica and Carolyn about hanging it there. I've also spoken with John Rendon and hanging it in the new Harbor Master office. It has received interest from the Blue Institute International Worldwide Oceans Conference next year. They've asked if we could talk to it or even present it. The Surfrider, the National Oceans Organization, has expressed interest in it, and also Wellfleet Splat. Everyone has just been so involved and so supportive during this that they want to focus it in their next events. So my initial pick was the Cultural Center or the Harbor Master office, but if you have another suggestion, I'm open to it, and I will be happy to do any follow-up work that you require if you want it installed in another place. The final goal is to install it for the Christmas stroll or the walk in that time frame. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Are there questions? This is new. Where are you collecting the bottles again from, or just?
The community. They've been bringing me water bottles.
So-
Instead of going to the dump, they bring it to me at the cultural
So
center.
you decide to bring them to the cultural center. Is that where you're collecting them now? How big, what size are you talking about, the final product?
The final project, the maximum it's going to be is 4 feet by 8 feet. However, if it goes into, and that's wall space. However, if it goes into the Harbor Master's office, he does not have 4 feet by 8 feet in that space. But I'm also looking at hanging it as a chandelier. So, you know, the final venue approval will depend on the size, on what the final size will be.
Okay. Michael?
I guess if we're going to vote next week on a final venue, we really need to know the support from the Harbor Master or Carolyn as to where it's going to hang. So there should be some sort of memo from the department head saying that it's approved.
I agree. I would, Chris, that, and if, think about that too, Michael. I think just double check that we're okay permit-wise. We're not going to get crossing any building permits or safety issues when we hang it. Great sounding project. Ed?
So are the bits and pieces that have been painted, are they down at the community, at the cultural center?
Yes, and I welcome all of you, anyone, to come and visit it right now. I did include, in the package that I sent you, I did include the final picture after the Cranberry Festival. However, it is going to change. That's when I bring now is when I bring my expertise to it.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you. We'll follow through.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else for public comments or announcements? If not, we'll move to the consent agenda. Steve, you wanted to?
Sure. Vote to accept the resignation of Christopher Rocket, Community Preservation Committee, effective 10/3/19. Vote to affirm the reappointment of Ralph Smith to the Community Center Facilities, term to expire 6/30/22. Vote to affirm the appointment of Matt Antone to the Board of Health, full position, term to expire 6/30/20. Vote to affirm the appointment of Arthur Rouse to the Planning Board, alternate position, term to expire 6/30, I believe that's 20. And please forgive me on the pronunciation of this next name. Vote to affirm the appointment of Heather Skronik to the Noise Committee, full business position, term to expire 12/31/20. And then finally, a request to waive the room rental fee of $100 for Monomoy High's National Art Honor Society. The event will be held on 10/23/19 at 6:30 p.m. at the Harwich Cultural Center.
Second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Steve?
I don't know how others would feel about this, but in the future, if we could, as we nominate names for each of these positions, if those on the nominating committee could just give a little background on each of the people as to why they think they're appropriate, I think that might be helpful.
Okay.
That's just a suggestion that I'm throwing out there.
Okay,
So,
thank you, Steve. Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
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 We have nothing for public hearings presentation, so move to new business. Noise violations of embers. Chris, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things. I did have a discussion with the attorney trying to resolve the other issue that we have. So he was going to put in a few calls, and I hope to have a recommendation back on the first 3 violations that were already had a hearing on, so that part. Subsequent to that, we had 2 additional violations that the board voted, I believe, a week or so ago. So we're going to schedule a public hearing, and believe it or not, on October 5th, there was an additional violation. I believe that what my goal is here, or my objective would be to schedule the 1 hearing for the 3 violations and take those all 3 at 1 hearing. But I would like to ask for the Board of Selectmen to appoint me as the hearing officer again, and we will go through a second round of hearings.
I'll take an action. Michael?
I move that we send the noise violation by embers submitted by the police chief to the town administrator as the hearing officer.
Second. Chris, are these 6 violations by 6 different individuals?
6 different incidents.
Incidents?
Same place.
Same place, but,
Yeah.
but not, we don't know now whether 6 different individuals.
In terms of the bands?
Right,
No, in terms of the complaint.
of the complaint.
The complainant.
Yeah, no, I'm
6
with you.
different complaints, or,
Oh, in terms of the party that actually
Right.
filed the complaint?
right,
I believe that they're all different.
okay. All right, we have a motion, is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously passed. Next on the agenda is East Fire Station, discussion and possible vote. I'll turn this to Chris again. I see Norm there as
So-
well.
I'll just do a quick overview in case there's I did send an image. I know Joe did a pretty good write-up, as well as Charlene. I think it probably makes sense at this point to just go ahead with the demolition of the Fire Station 2 as was originally contemplated in the contract. And if something's going to be done at a later date, then something could be done at a later date. I just, as any case, when we have someone that wants to present something to the board, I think it's a policy decision in terms of that. And I did share the letter that I received, that someone had an interest in leasing that out But the recommendation, based upon Joe's write-up and the town planner's write-up, is to go ahead with the demolition.
Thank you, Chris. Chief?
Nothing new to report, except that I hope that, I know I toured the site with staff from Town Hall. Took the administrator out last Friday, to just get a flavor of what exactly are we talking about. I'm probably, I'll take some responsibility for someone approaching, saying, geez, you know, we thought we'd be a great idea to reuse the station, and I thought it was a great idea. But that was a bit naive on my part, because I'm not an engineer, I'm not a, you know, the planning and everybody.
But people have mentioned that to me as well.
Just because it's a good idea doesn't mean we can do it. When you just drive around to where the parking now is paved at the new station, and you look how close the old station is, it just is problematic. I'll go back to something that I did say to the board before. I believe the land's worth more than the building. There's a reason we didn't reuse that building. I am thrilled that there is interest from the private sector to reuse the building, even if they can't. I hope that that interest will continue to the property, and I understand that as a complex situation to get through. But I like to look at the glass half full. But certainly after really taking a hard look, listening to the professionals, it appears that the plan that originally was proposed, what is in the project budget, all the calculations for runoff, it was pointed out to me, were based on that property, the entire property. It appears that the prudent thing to do was to follow the initial plan and to take that building down.
Okay. Michael?
I move that we continue as originally planned and demolish the East Harwich Fire Department.
Second. For those that were here last week or are watching, Chief Clark basically gave the same explanation last week. What we asked to do is get something in the minutes to confirm that. And that's in our packet and on our website. So this is basically a follow-up from that discussion.
Your staff at Town Hall here did an excellent job doing an objective review of that building.
Detailed write-up.
Very,
So
very
it's in
good
the-
job.
It's in the packet. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? Thank you, Norm. Next on the agenda is contracts, and I guess, Chief, you better stick around. But Chris, you want to lead this, or Joe, or,
Yeah, it's a very straightforward change order. This is change order number 7 for Fire Station 2. The chief presented it, procurement team went over it, and there's a memo where we recommend board approval, and to be consistent with past change orders, that the chairman be authorized to sign, and we can create a signature line on that page for you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Norm, you have a follow-up to that?
As I said to you before, Mr. Chairman, that I try and group change orders so that that the board and the public can get a real full vision of what's going on and what those changes happen to be. We have tried very, very hard to minimize change orders, but the reality is that things do happen, and we have to make some changes and adjustments. Some change orders, as we've gone along, have been credits, but I'm before you tonight with this list of change orders, and I will be glad to answer any questions the best I can. If not, I would ask for your support on these change orders.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for Joe or the chief at this point? Ed?
Change order 63 is to complete the epoxy floor and lines as originally proposed. We're talking lines on the outside in the parking lot?
No,
or-
this is part of the epoxy floor. I'll give you a very quick and honest explanation as to what this was about. The initial plans called for that floor is epoxied. It's very heavy duty, but it also called for backup lines, and it also called for red squares where the trucks park. That initially was kind of an aesthetic thing, but it does have some practicality. and through the process of putting specifications together, it was missed. So it's a question that the initial bid would have been about 13,000 less, and so it's been pointed out to me that we're not paying more because they missed it.
Okay. Any other, please, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the subject change order for Firehouse 2 in the amount of $41,731.16 upon the recommendation of the Assistant Town Administrator.
I'll second that.
Second.
Discussion.
Yes, please, Mike?
Is there a pending change order for septic wastewater as well? Or is that,
There is
there is? And what's the amount of that change order?
18,000.
Is there a reason why that's not in here tonight? Or is
Hasn't
it-
been processed yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Move to the next change order.
So, Mr. Chairman, you had asked for an overview on the Phase 2 sewer project, and then the award of contract 2 for the sewer project. So if I could work with Caleb here. So we went through the material to kind of see, what were the recommendations that CDM made in regards to the Phase 2 project. And I put the numbers here. I provided backup information for each of these slides in the packet from what CDM had provided. You could see that on the 2017, just to remind folks, and from recollection, in 2017, they had CDM had put together the numbers and the projection for what the cost of Phase 2 would be. In April of 2018, just before town meeting, we had a request, I believe it originated at FinCom, but it could have been the Board of Selectmen as well, that we realized that the numbers for 2017 were based upon an earlier projections, and that they wanted to have those projections updated. So CDM was tasked with going in, looking at the numbers, and providing an update for town meeting. And I highlighted a couple of the ones here where the construction went from 17.6 up to 18.5 million dollars. The policing, they had increased that amount based upon the increased cost of what they had projected. They had not really had anything. I think they had roped it in with the policing on the easement and legal. So they did allocate that. That, I believe, was a suggestion that I had made, making sure that with all the work that needed to be done to secure easements throughout the project, that there was going to be legal expenses and easement expenses related to that. And then the Chatham Pump Station, all the material that goes from Phase 2 will eventually go down to the Chatham Pump Station. And Chatham has an agreement in the IMA that we share a proportional cost of that station based upon the amount of flow. So the flow has been determined, and then that number was recalibrated and went from the 2.1 to 2.95. The part that hopefully I will try to get into, and I don't have all the answers tonight, but on the actual bids, when the bids came in, the construction numbers were really in the wheelhouse of CDM. It had been my hope, and I did find out after the fact, that CDM, on some of these building projects for schools, they do an in-house estimate, and then they have a external estimate that's done as well for developing the budget numbers. So they only did an in-house estimate through CDM contractors, who I have had some experience. I wish I could say favorable experience, but not favorable experience with CDM contractors in-house. They did the estimation, and as you can see, it's clearly obvious that it went from 18.5 to 26.5. I do have a slide on that that we can kind of get into. Caleb? So on the cost summary variations, I didn't put it on the slide. I do think that part of this was really on CDM. that by using an in-house part of their company. I think CDM is an excellent design firm, but in terms of their contracting side, I had real issue. I don't think it's anything that I would hide. We had a long-standing dispute with CDM in my last community on their contractor side, and they were the ones that were doing some of the estimate. So I think that that needs to be out there. The ones that they had provided in terms of some of the rationale for what they saw, CDM, and they did provide a write-up, which was included in the material, that in April of 2018, the design plans were only at 50% complete. So they had a difference in terms of like an increase in the distance of pipe that led to additional cost. That's one of the things that they have pointed out in that. The second, they indicated that design changes that were made to save the residents, putting the, in order to avoid grinder pumps in northeast and southwest areas in particular, they had indicated to me that a simple drop of the pipe in depth going down an additional foot or two could eliminate the need for the grinder pumps. This is one where, you know, it has some savings for the residents, obviously a direct savings for the residents by not having to have grinder pumps, but obviously it has an additional cost to the project overall. And then on the design of the pump station buildings, they had indicated that their original assumption had been that they would do similar to what Chatham did, in which Chatham has very limited use of buildings, and they leave a lot of the infrastructure out in the open and just merely have it fenced off. A decision was made in order to drop the, hopefully the cost on these easements for the pieces of property that we needed to have the easements to locate the pump stations, to put some of this infrastructure inside of buildings. So that was one that they had indicated that those two factors also led. I think one of the more significant ones in doing a little bit of additional research on my own was just on the market conditions. That they had anticipated the bidders of 8 to 10, but only 3 to 4. So I think timing of the project, having the project go out when it did, contractors already kind of lining up work, that we had a decreased number of contractors that were interested. When you have a decreased number, you're going to have a tighter market, and therefore you get additional people will put additional premium on when you have a lesser number. And then there are some individual items such as the paving increase that I think David Young from CDM had mentioned when he was here doing a overview, that some elements of it, such as the paving, increased by 50%. I think in terms of the cost and where we are now, Contract 1 realized the new market condition. Contract 2 came in on target for Contract 1 prices, but certainly we were well beyond the original estimate. We do have after this a request for Contract 2 to have, the company's name is RJV Construction. They did come in well below what our had, and our won the contract, obviously with us on Contract 1, and then also they won the bid over in Chatham. And I think RJV actually came in and sharpened their pencil because they want to be a competitor on the Cape. So you see that that our, who has been, I think, a very fair and a competitive bidder for us, did not win that second contract. So that does kind of indicate that market conditions do have a relevancy to any of these projects. Next. Just in terms of the decrease in cost to the taxpayers on interest, I know, Mr. Chairman, I think you had asked me also for this. You know, one of the things that I think you have to look at things over time. Certain decisions were made in the time span in which that those discussions were being held. The original estimate was for a $22.4 million project at $17.7 million construction. And just as a reminder to folks that SRF, the State Revolving Loan Fund, only funds the 17.7, the construction piece. We have to go out to the marketplace for all the design work and the other peripherals. that are needed beforehand. So the projections were made originally to kind of say what the impact would be if it was not funded by SRF. And at the time, we had a bond rating of AA+. So those projections were made in a different light. The interest cost calculations were around $15 million of savings on 30 year, or $15 million worth of anticipated costs at 30 years at a 4% rate. So those assumptions were made. We had not known that we would be first on the list for SRF, and that the regional, we had expectation that the regional efforts would be yield fruit, but we certainly could not definitively show that. In April 2018, as I indicated earlier, there was an update. That number went to 24.8 with 18.5 million in construction. At this point, we had started to get a little better information, having the agreement with Chatham close to finalized, that we knew would be a regional application. So we then made some assumptions that it would go down to 2%, making it on the funded portion, and then we also wanted to make sure that we would have the funded portion of the SRF list. Again, on the SRF process, there's, you know, this is submitted throughout the state for various projects, and they can only fund a certain amount. So the higher you are on the list, the more likely you're going to be funded. But in our case, we were very lucky that we were, not lucky, but well done by CDM in this case, that we were first on the list. So we were definitely going to get funded. And now when we look at 2019, the project was submitted. We are number 1 on the priority list. Contract 1 is eligible for 0% and eligible for 0.5% loan forgiveness. That 0.5% loan forgiveness, I think we got some correspondence on that. That was about $400,000 worth of savings. So not an insignificant amount of money. Contract 2, if the board approves it, would bring us close to spending the $18.5 million that was approved at the 2018 annual town meeting and would be at the 0% interest. We did miss our window for the loan forgiveness, so the loan forgiveness would not be, at least my understanding, would not be included in this second round. Next. And then on, I think we're missing a slide. Do you want to go to the, there should be one on cost inflation. There we go. So on the, one of the questions that came up at the meeting on the 3-town meeting, the 3 Board of Selectmen meeting was what happened to the original $240 million that was estimated. That number was generated in 2014, and when you compound out a 3% construction inflation, not regular inflation, but a construction inflation, you can see that that goes in 2023 to $313 million. Now this does not, and I put in an additional column here, pending the revisions to the CWMP with the completed work excluded and DHY assumptions. So the $240 million, just as a for instance, includes in there a treatment plant located in Harwich at the DPW facility that I think was in the ballpark of about $60 million. So to add in the revised CWMP that includes the DHY work, that number of $60 million goes down, plant only, down to about $17 or $18 million. But then there's additional piping costs that goes in to actually get the piping to that area. So the cost savings won't be the delta between the 60 and the 18. It will be a lesser number because we are adding pipe to get from Route 28 and other parts in West Harwich to the facility that would be constructed as part of DHY on Thaddeus Stevens Road over in the town of Dennis. Okay, next. Do you have, maybe, yeah, go back to that. Thank you, Caleb. So this just breaks down, Mike Judici from CDM provided this, where the 2018 annual town meeting had the 18.5, the Chatham pump station at the 2.9, The total amount of the appropriation, $21,450,000. Contract price for bid one, the hour work that is being done now, is $11,368,000. We are required by SRF to have a 5% contingency, so you see the 5% contingency built in. What's being asked before the board tonight is to do contract two. We did price that in such a way where we wanted to maximize the available amount of money that was left in the project to do as much as we could of phase two. So that bid came in at $6.6 million. Again, we're required to have a 5% contingency of $331,000, and the Chatham Pump Station, as bid, came in less. So where we were a lot larger share of that cost, then because their bids came in less, we get to share in that. The remaining construction funds in this budget would be $150,533, and you can see at the bottom here the additional phase two appropriation, the $610 for general services, resident inspection, and the other town costs. I would say, Mr. Chairman, I've had a lot of opportunity to kind of think about this. And, you know, I was the one that had proposed that you do not have to go out to bid when you select, per the law, when you select a designer. And it was my belief that at the time CDM had done so much work, had done such legwork on the project, that they deserved the ability to see if they could deliver a project that was going to be on time and on budget. And, you know, I think now where they have missed and have to have a contract three, and to have that contract three in order to finish phase two would be in the neighborhood of $8 million additional above and beyond, that I think at this point that we need to finish with them so we can finish the work that's already been contemplated, but that I think phase three, and I know at the DHY discussions, there's been talk, I know, Mr. Chairman, you've been attending those as well as Selectman Howe, that I think that work should be bid out, and that we need to see if there are other firms that can provide, in the final analysis, more reliable numbers for us to move forward with in the ongoing phases. That
Thank you,
concludes
Chris.
my overview, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Don, you have questions, comments?
I'm just going to read from the email string. These are all from June 17th, which was the night that we were told that we needed to act now or we'd lose $15 million and there wouldn't be any 0% financing. This email is from Nate Keenan, Deputy Director of Mass Clean Water Trust. He says to Ashraf, who's, let's see here, he's the DEP from Massachusetts. I got a call from Harwich's financial advisor, and he said they're close to missing the June 30th deadline for everything to be bid and submitted to you. If they did, would you issue a waiver if they passed that date? Hi, Nat. They would lose the principal forgiveness if they missed June 30th deadline. We don't grant waivers for that. They do need to submit a revised project schedule and ask for an extension for awarding of a contract. If the schedule is acceptable, we will grant them a waiver for awarding the contract, but not for principal forgiveness at 0%. Then there's a cover from our financial advisor from that. Then there's a letter from an email from our financial advisor, Christy Tafuri, to Carol Capola and Peter Frazier. Attached a proposed debt service schedule showing the estimated impact of issuing through Clean Water Trust's 0% loan program versus conventional bond financing. The comparison purposes, we've assumed a 20-year amortization schedule and a level debt service payment for each scenario. Estimated savings by issuing through the Trust's 0% loan program can be summarized as follows. Now, we just heard $15 million again. On an $11.5 million loan, approximately $3.1 million would be saved over the life of the loan with 0%, and that would be assuming we didn't get the approval for the waiver. And then $21 825 as a loan amount would be approximately $5.9 million over the life of the loan. The estimated savings above include the administrative and loan origination fees expected to be charged by the trust in conjunction with these loans, and these schedules do not assume any principal forgiveness. That's the first thought. Second thought is I totally agree with our administrator about CDM Smith, and as you know, I pushed to make that a competitive scenario for DHY because I was very disappointed that they keep getting things. The estimate that CDM Smith provided to the potential bidders when the RFP was actually issued, so that's not the year before, it's not the 2 years before, that's actually with the bid specs the day that they issued it, was actually more off than the estimate that they gave us originally. It was further away from the true figure. By comparison, Chatham at the exact same time was using Weston and Sampson, and while the project was pricier than they expected a couple of years before, their estimate was spot on. It was perfect. And Barnstable also had a project. Prices were higher, estimate was consistent with the bids they received. The third thing is, and this is the final thing, I'm not sure why we took their advice because they're engineers and designers, but they chose to break this up into 3 contracts rather than 1. So they lost the magnitude of a project for a bigger company. And basically that leads me to one final thought, which is we went ahead, we awarded the first contract, and you forgive the pun, but if we award this next contract, we are flushing out all the money that's available for this project. And then you're going to go with basically 200 hostages to town meeting and say, if you want to finish this for these folks, you better give us $8 million. That's not the way to approach this. We should have admitted the problem at the very beginning, if we wanted any credibility at all, and gone back to town meeting and say, here's where we're at. We're off, and we're off by a lot, but we really need to do this thing. We're in a bad position now. Knowing what we know now, if we award this contract, God help us if we get to town meeting, because the same people who got involved in this mess are proposing that we get involved with DHY, where if we approve it, we will have no local control over it. And we're going with the estimates for the savings with a guy who was off out of the chute with our first contract. So, I mean, I'm perfectly willing to wait for a town meeting, but I'm not going to vote for a contract 2 that basically takes all the rest of the money out to get what is arguably only about 2/3 of the project done.
Anyone else? Michael, and then I'll jump in at some point.
First, I'd thank the town administrator for admitting now that we should look at another engineering firm for our next projects. I too am concerned about spending this money and awarding this contract. We've done nothing but rush from the beginning of this. I was involved when we negotiated with Chatham. We kept rushing through, and we told town meeting that we had solid estimates because our engineer told us we had solid estimates. But we had to get the money passed because Chatham needed to know. So that was our first rush. I did vote the last contract because, as I stated, I wasn't going to cost the taxpayers $15 million, and that's what I was told. It went between $15 million and $21 million, depending on the meeting that we were at. So I did vote that because of that. I was a little disheartened to find out that the savings weren't that. And we never really got an estimate or an answer from the town administrator, which I assume that he's going to answer from Don's emails when we're done with this, as to why we were told $15 million. I kind of computed the math the same, Chris, I think, as you did, and I don't come up with a $15 million savings. As far as the estimates go, over and over and over we were told by our engineer that this is vertical construction. Pipes in the ground are different than building buildings, and this was easy to calculate. There's a table on Massachusetts website pertaining to asphalt, and now we're talking about a 50% increase in asphalt, and the only 50% increase that I could possibly come up with is because we've decided to go down 28 feet in several locations to save the neighborhoods the money on the pumps, which we never, as a board, finally voted not to go to those pumps and add assistance. So I don't believe we ever went back to the public and said, by not going down 28 feet, we're gonna have to have these pumps. But the cost of that is a lot more to go down 28 feet than to buy the pumps for the residents. That never came back to us. We talked about, a little while ago, we talked about the bids, that there was only 3 to 4 bidders instead of 8 to 10. What's striking is the bids from the 4 people were all almost exact. They were all very, very close, which means the bids were correct and the engineer just plain screwed up. And I think that we need to say that the engineer just plain screwed up. We've rushed from the beginning, and now's an opportunity not to rush and go back to the residents of East Harwich who we told we were gonna sewer 644 homes originally, dropped it to 600 homes. The engineer, along with the administrator who ran this project, talked about dropping streets to get down to that 24 million or $21.5 million number, whatever it is. But now we're dropping 1/3 of the homes. Then we're gonna go back to town meeting, apologize after the fact, and say to get you where we need to get you, we have to charge you $8 million more. At the same time, we haven't had a presentation on exactly what DHY is gonna cost us, exactly when the pipes have to go in 28 because of the pavement moratorium. We don't have any exact cost, and we couldn't answer most of the questions that were asked of us the night of the meeting with the 3 towns. We couldn't answer most. David Young sent me emails since that he has answered those questions, but he hasn't answered those questions. There's been frustration with the wastewater support committee from the beginning, and they basically all resigned after the fact, and we have no representation there. Another striking thing was our person that we hired for a wastewater superintendent, along with water, has been included in very, very, very little. And he came to the table and tried to be a part of this, and he was not included by the engineer and the town administrator. The tri-town meeting that we just had is another example. Every other town brought their professionals. We, as a Board of Selectmen, showed up, and our town administrator showed up. The only questions that were asked of from Harwich residents to the Harwich Board of Selectmen, and we had no answers. So are we really gonna go to town meeting, spend the rest of this contract money? Are we really gonna go without an apology first and put the 2 contracts together and go out to bid for a much larger contract, which hopefully we would get more bids for and a lower price because of less mobilization costs? Or do we take the time and demand answers as to why we are where we are? Other towns have thrown CDM Smith out. But I think we're doing a terrible disservice to the residents of this town if we award this contract without getting an apology to them and without doing a little bit more work on our numbers. The pavement one is absolutely striking, and you can just go on the state's website and figure out that pavement has not gone up 50%. And as far as the CWMP goes, 2016, I believe we went to the town meeting and said, we have a 40-year plan for $240 million. We didn't say we have a 40-year plan for $240 million plus 3% construction inflation, which to me was another snow job by CDM Smith. We're not prepared, and I think that we need to go back and look at what we're doing. We're not talking about change orders to the current contract yet either, and there are some that we haven't seen, and there is one for the fire department that they're gonna absorb in their contract. A building that was planned for years was forgotten. What else have we forgotten, and are we really gonna spend all this money?
Let me, Don, then I want to,
Yeah, I have an actual question here. Out of the total amount of money, the $24+ million, is this a proportional shortfall? I mean, is it partly design and engineering and construction, or did the design and construction get fully paid already and the shortfall's all in construction?
Yeah, great question. I've been advised that they will probably expend their original appropriation to finish contract 2, and probably will be coming to the town and asking for additional resident inspection for contract 3.
So they got paid the entire amount that they
That's the doggone
estimated.
truth, so.
Let me come back and just, Steve, go ahead.
Just to, I guess this would be for Chris, as is Michael's suggestion here, is it wiser to take a look at what we have to do going forward and trying to rebid that? Or are we actually gonna put ourselves in a position by not doing that, by not accepting contract 2, of potentially paying more money for what we've already gotten, projected to be done? I mean, is there a legitimate case to be made here that, it would be more fiscally responsible to take a look at going back and rebidding, even with contract 2? Or is that really gonna put us behind the 8 ball and hurt the taxpayers even more, even though the intent behind what Michael is saying, I think, is it's an honorable intent. I mean, what we're trying to do here is to protect the taxpayers, so. But if you could,
Yeah, I have given a lot of thought to this, and a lot of the information that I've relied upon CDM for a lot of the information that I've made decisions on. So I freely admit that. You guys pay me to be the administrator, I'm not an engineer. And what I'm recommending is, we have a known commodity. We have a known bid. The RJV people came in a little bit less than what even our came in. And to Michael's point earlier, when you have a bid environment and you have the prices pretty similar, we have a good bid. I would recommend that we do go forward with it, because if we wait, we know construction inflation is probably gonna be 3%, so we're gonna add 3% to that. And, if we do that as a separate piece, or rely on packaging that with something else, and the voters vote it down, now where are we? We have it as number 1 on the list. We know that it's gonna get to 0%. I think it makes sense to go forward. I had a capital outlay meeting just before the selectmen's meeting, and I relayed to them some of the information on, as I know it, where we are with DHY. And, the question or the observation was raised that perhaps we should just finish this phase. I mean, I'm kind of reacting to what the board wanted. And what I heard from the board was to try to live up to the commitment made at town meeting and try to finish phase 2. So I did ask CDM to put together a contract 3, so if we want to finish phase 2, but the observation was made at the capital outlay meeting that why not take the remaining parts of phase 2 and add it to a phase 3 or a phase 4, because we will be back in East Harwich. And go out then to get some economies of scale that was alluded to earlier. But I think we have known commodities now. We have a bidder that is, from everything I've heard, is a sound bidder that is coming in and creating competition with that should benefit us. To make the case for the 8.4, we do know the bid environment. I would certainly recommend that anything we do from a town perspective would be to gear up like we did with the fire station, have the bids due in just before town meeting, so we go in on contract 3, if it's the board's desire to finish phase 2 in a timely fashion, do the bid work, get that bid in, and have an actual number to move forward with. So I think it's certainly not a good position to be in. We've I think, all been put into a difficult position relying upon CDM. But I think in this circumstance, knowing that we have a 0%, knowing that we're number 1 on the list, it makes sense to go forward and have a known commodity and create the bid environment of having another vendor down here to hopefully help do some additional work in the future.
Heather, Michael?
To follow.
Steve, you want?
no, yeah, let me just, the only thing I would say is, my great concern here is that we're gonna put ourselves, in a position where we're gonna pay more. I agree that it's been a huge disappointment, the way we've been guided in this on the CDM side. And it's clear, at least I can see my colleagues here on the board, are certainly disappointed as well and have some real reservations about doing anything going forward relative to our relationship with them. So, but I don't want to jump in reaction to it and end up costing the taxpayers more money than we should. So that's my only comment.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Michael?
I guess the first question, just so it's clear to the public, we're in no jeopardy of losing the 0% financing for Phase 2, correct, Chris?
I wouldn't say that. I mean, we're on the list. If we delay, we can get, as Don read, we can get delays and keep that. I don't know if those delays will last 5 years. That's my only.
I mean, the way the email read to me was that we have been awarded 0% for Phase 2.
You do need to get extensions, official extensions.
Okay, now just on Stephen's comments, 3% inflation. It's standard practice for contractors to hold price, and I don't want to speak for the contractor that bid on this, to hold price while political action takes or while we go to town meeting and ask. So for this contract too, we'd certainly have to go back to the contractor and ask them if they'd be willing to hold price, which we haven't done. So that's an answer we're going to vote on something tonight when we haven't asked the question. I would argue, and I have spoken to several large contractors, that a $15 million contract bidding on that versus bidding on a 6.6 and an $8 million contract, the larger contract would have less costs. So are you saying with certainty that this is going to go up more than 3% and our savings is going to be less than 3% without doing any homework?
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
So if we're going to vote on this contract, I'm asking you.
I can't speculate into the future. I think what we have is a sense that the past it's been 3%. To your point, economies of scale, the bigger you do a project, potentially the better off you are in terms of price. I don't disagree with that. In this circumstance, though, you're talking about going out and different areas are going to be done, so it's not contiguous areas, it would be areas that would be added. And I'm not necessarily sure that the economies of scale of having construction all done in one area would yield as much benefit if we had an area that was contiguous. But there are a few operational concerns that I
So lastly, well, two more things. We told town meeting very clearly in Phase 2 what we were going to do in all of our conversations with the public, all of our public hearings. Everything we've done has been based on sewering 600 homes. So there was an $8 million mistake made, which we do owe the public an apology for and an explanation for. I, at this point, don't have a whole lot of confidence in the engineered plans and think that the next conversation we should have might be to relook at some of that stuff, an independent review, and see if we are going down 28 feet places we shouldn't be going down 28 feet. But I'll leave that alone. Chris, we also told the town of Chatham that we're going to sewer 600 homes. What is the town of Chatham thinking about us only sewering 400 homes and less flow going into their facility, which there was a lot of thought and calculations in that negotiation, and they needed that flow to go in, and we're going to pay, if I read the contract right again last night, we're going to pay for the flow for 600 homes regardless, correct? So what's the math on that before we vote on this contract? There's a lot that we don't know tonight, and we're being asked to vote on a contract.
For the IMA for the 7 million, I actually had advocated that we shouldn't pay until we have the flow going. And a decision was made, for better or for worse, to just pay on a schedule. So over 7 years, we pay the full amount. Obviously, it's to our advantage to do the construction sooner than later to try to get those flows.
So just to follow up, because of what Chris just said, Chris, you may very well have, but we voted what we voted, and our deal is our deal.
I agree.
Without knowing those numbers, again, that's going to add to everything else that we're doing. And as far as DHY goes, we're not even close. And I really hope this board has some long conversations before we go and spend that money without asking town meeting if they want to finish East Harwich first and do what we said we were going to do. And to me, this is about getting confidence back in the voters who have absolutely no confidence in us whatsoever, because we did believe the story that was told to us by our engineer.
Let me, I have Steve, and then I'll,
Just a procedural question. Do we need to vote on this contract tonight?
well, I think we don't need to. We can and answer some of these questions, which may
I
be
need some
worthwhile, because these are good questions. And I take your point, Sheila. We're all disturbed with how, quite frankly, poorly the estimates were made. And the idea that we're missing the construction from just, 2 years by 43% is unbelievable to me. I don't understand why they broke their own, CDM Smith broke their internal protocol and used only in-house rather than in-house and outside.
Yeah, I don't know if that's their protocol, Mr. Chairman. I was saying that for MSBA projects.
And give us
require it.
a good bid. Where I do disagree somewhat with Don and Michael, not in all the concerns, but in some ways we're having extensive discussion on the estimates, and in fact we have good bids. And so the number, even though we missed the estimates by large numbers, I'm comfortable with the contract one. We had 5 bids, 4 of them came in, I exaggerate, but almost to the dollar. I think, Joe, you looked in the bid opening on contract 2, those are very close too. So I'm comfortable the cost is the cost, even though we screwed up on the bid, and we have, as both Michael and Don have stated, we have some serious trust to build up in town if missing it that far. I would propose at this point, on discussions and some objects, that we, Chris, will give you a chance to answer some of these questions on Chatham and a couple others when we bring it back. Michael?
I appreciate that. Larry, just to your point, and I want to make it very clear, this isn't about the contractor that bid on the project. They have a great estimate. I agree 100%. But to me, it's more that we told the voters of the town what we were doing. It's not about whether we have it. It's about getting confidence back by going back and apologizing and saying, in order to finish, we need to do X, Y, and Z.
No,
And then we can recommend holding off on DHY, or maybe they vote for it all together.
Yeah.
But they should vote,
Yeah.
not necessarily just us.
and I'm not blaming the contract. I'm saying the bid price, the contract, I'm saying the cost of doing this work, I'm comfortable with. The estimate, we screwed up.
Agreed.
But and that's just where I'm going to, because we're doing a lot of debating on the estimates for the reasons we've all stated, that it led us to mislead everyone. But the cost of doing the work is what it is at this point. That's what I'm comfortable
Agreed.
with. Don?
Just 2 things, and I'm hoping that we can get in the future to talk about this with the knowledge of whether they could hold their bid price or not. But just again, quoting from the warrant article explanation, this will fully implement phase 2 of a regulatory required plan. We promised them up front that we were going to finish the whole thing for that amount of money. The correct action would have been to not go forward with the first one if we knew we were going to lose, we were going to run out of money. I don't use the word lightly. Everybody's focusing just on the CDM Smith, but we were essentially railroaded. We had 13 days left until June 30th. We were told we were going to save $15 million. That's not true. We were told we were going to lose the 0% financing prospect. That wasn't true. And all it took me was about a half hour sitting in the finance director's office and making some phone calls to our financial advisor to find out it wasn't true. And it's not speculative. It was DEP, and it's the Clean Water Trust. They're in writing. I mean, we need to be able to reestablish some trust with the public that we're partners with them. We're not just going to spend out all the money and say, oh, boy, we couldn't finish it for that amount of money.
Well, let's answer some of these questions, and then we'll come back.
Right.
Is that agreeable to everyone?
Yeah, just so
Chris?
I'm clear though, on the IMA, the $7 million gets paid over 7 years, period. The amount of flow is on us. We've always known that the flow is on us, so I'm not sure what additional questions.
I think the question I have on that is,
Will they hold the price, for one?
no, I think the question I have is
The
what,
question of will they hold the price is I can ask them how long they'll hold the price for.
by that, but, excuse me, Don, in terms of the IMA with Chatham, Chris, it's been a while since I've read sounds like you just did, it's been a while since I've read it. But could you just read track of what our start date was expected to be on I mean, we're paying the capital costs, the fixed costs, we're paying over $7 million over years.
Yeah.
But at some point, we double check on what our obligation is to start delivering flow to them.
Again, just two things on this. Number one, the amount of flow doesn't really matter for Chatham. They get paid no matter what on a timeline. It accelerates the timeline if we send them flow early. The big thing that we tried to do, and we were successful in doing, is on the coordination. It didn't make any sense for us to do contract 1, 2, or whatever if Chatham didn't have the pipe to accept it. So we did coordinate with Chatham, and Chatham approved, and their work is underway, as our work is underway, to take the flow from Harwich and bring it to the treatment plant. So the coordination was more just to make sure that we were gonna build our system and have someplace to send it, and Chatham would have it. To Michael's point, it's a good point, I think Chatham would like to have the 300,000 gallons, so that way they can assess the plant.
helps.
That was always part of it. I think what I'll do, Mr. Chairman, I'll put the IMA in the packet, and then you can, go
Right.
through that. And I think the reasonable follow-up question to this is how long will RJV be willing to hold their price?
Right. Michael?
Just to follow up, and I won't go along with this, but our taxpayers need to know that we're gonna maximize the $7 million investment. I mean, I think that's first and foremost. So as we, as a board, decide whether or not we're gonna recommend to the voters spending the $8 million to finish Phase 3 versus not, it's important that the taxpayers understand that we're paying the $7 million no matter what. So it's more of a statement than any homework you have to do. As far as O&M costs and flow costs, in those negotiations, in good faith, we told Chatham that we were gonna deliver from 600 homes. We didn't say we might. We got approved at town meeting for 24 or 21.5 million to sewer 600 homes. Don's read the article several meetings at this point. We negotiated in good faith that that's what we were gonna deliver. Now we're talking about taking a third out. And I bet you their projections for O&M costs and everything else was under the assumption that we were gonna do what we said we were gonna do. So I want a meeting to happen between Chatham and Chris, Bob Duncanson, or somebody else to come here and to say, to give the nod, that they're okay if we don't send them our waste from 200 homes, or a third of what we told them we were gonna.
Yeah.
I don't wanna assume anything anymore.
Right. We'll come back and get those. Stan?
Yeah, Stan Pastuzak, Northeast Drive. I'm trying to remember what I want to say, all the things I'm hearing. There's probably like 3 points. One is I agree with Mr. Ballantyne. I think the biggest problem was the estimates, not the cost. You've got good bids right now. So why you wouldn't go with those bids, I'm not sure, because that's not going to change. The second, as part of that, Mr. McCaskill's comment was, I guess really the question is there an economy of scale of combining 400 homes or continuing with the 200 and then going to the town for the other 200? Unless there's an economy of scale, I don't know why you wouldn't try to go with the bid you have right now. There was a third point.
Happens to all of us.
But anyways, I really don't know, what the problem is. The cost is gonna be what the cost is gonna be. Unless there's a big economy of scale different, you're gonna have to go to the town for the additional money. One way or the other.
Michael?
Oh, I know. My other point is, if there was this problem, why didn't you stop with even approving contract 1? If you thought we weren't gonna be able to finish the project with the money you had approved by the town. You knew that when contract 1 was bid out. You knew that was way over and that you couldn't finish the rest of the project with the remaining money.
So I'll answer your last, may I?
Go ahead.
I'll answer your last question first. I was told that the town of Harwich, the taxpayers of the town of Harwich were gonna lose 15 to 21 million if we didn't vote that contract that night. So if you go back and watch, I made my vote and my statement based on the fact that the savings to you as a taxpayer, and me as a taxpayer, were gonna be 15 million. As far as why don't we bid the contract 2, why don't we approve it? Because we have to go back for the 8 million. Most of the taxpayers and residents that I've spoken to in East Harwich, they want a shot at approving this or not approving this. They want it to go back to them. They want to understand these mistakes. There's a lot of people that don't pay attention to these meetings or the newspaper. They want a shot at this. If we're gonna, and to the last questions that I just asked about going back to Chatham, if we approve this contract, we will have spent everything town meeting said we weren't. And I'm not comfortable doing that until we have answers to the questions, like what Chatham's gonna think about us sending that much, because then we're basically forcing an extra $8 million on you as a taxpayer.
You know, in all fairness to all of you, if there were more people at the town participating in these meetings and maybe asking questions beforehand, that might have helped also. But as you can see, how many were here tonight?
No question.
Yeah. Thank you, Stan. Any other comments? Yeah, we'll bring it back and try to get some more clarity on this. Yeah, I would remind everyone, because that we're not, this isn't an issue for us for our health. This is an issue for us because we're working to clean our embayments. We're under regulatory requirements for that. We still have a lawsuit that's not settled. It's in abeyance now. I think just last week there's a letter to the Cape Cod Times from the Conservation Law Foundation arguing that we're not moving fast enough to do some of this work. So I take the point about we're misled and moving faster than we should have possibly for the dollar value. But I think taking that aside, we felt we were under some pressure to get going on this, to get moving, to start to solve this problem, meet our requirements. It's not to say we have to build back town trust. I take all your points. We'll bring this back and see where we go. I just wanted to make a statement that we're not doing this just because we want to dig holes.
Thank you.
Okay, Ed.
I guess, you know, in looking at where we are, we have started on implementing a plan that was designed and accepted on sewering what's called Phase 2. We're doing, I'm not sure, I guess a third of it or a half of it in this first construction contract. And have it question whether to do another chunk of it with the remaining funds that were approved, and ask, you know, and having to return to the voters to ask for money to finish up the rest of it. In doing so, though, you know, we all have questions about how well we've been served by CDM, and I think the general conclusion is that we could have been served much better by them. But at this point, it's not clear to me that we wouldn't, at this point, finish constructing the plan that they designed for us for the Phase 2 area. We may do something completely different as we move into whatever that next phase out in East Harwich is going to be, with a different designer. But it will most likely have to be designed to tie into the work that's been done in Phase 2. You know, and I want to make it clear that I'm not saying this in any way to offer it as an excuse or but, you know, I think as we move forward, given the complexity of these plans, it would be good for us to hire, and I've advocated for this long, a project manager to advise us as these plans are brought forward, as our designers work on developing the plans to make sure that they're maintaining schedule, to do all those things that a project manager does in construction. And I think a lot of these questions, especially the question about getting an independent estimate, would have been, we wouldn't be in that situation we are in with the estimates that we are now, and the dissatisfaction that that's created. But as you've indicated, Mr. Chairman, for the design we have now, the costs are what they are. I guess the question is, what would be the difference in doing this in one contract or two, and the costs would be what are called, I guess, the mobilization costs. And typically, in construction contracts of this size, those costs are listed. We ought to be able to go into the contract and bid documents that Robert Auer provided for us, and to find out what their mobilization costs are, to see what we, if we anticipate construction inflation costs to be 3% over the $15 million that we are currently assuming it's going to cost to finish this, that would be $450,000. If mobilization costs per project is any more than $225,000, then it would probably make sense to possibly look at waiting and doing this as one contract. But if it's less than that, we're probably going to wind up paying more.
And that's another good question to find out. My final thought on this, I think we've pretty much done enough, is Chris, could you find out for us ballpark figure what it would cost to have an independent review of the design? To see if we want to move forward with all these, we have enough questions, if that's, at this point, with the questions we have on what's going on now?
Most likely, I would ask Weston and Sampson, since we already have Charlie Sumner under
Right.
contract. We can
Yeah.
ask them to come up with an estimate for that.
I think that'd be good. That may be something we want to pursue as well. Have we done enough on this tonight? I do appreciate, this is not a subject we want to talk about, and I appreciate, Chris, your presentation, and I appreciate my fellow selectmen for the in-depth and reasoned discussion. Move next to the town minister easement license agreement discussion.
Yeah, just under the town administrator report, Mr. Chairman, I might go kind of quickly through these, just, in light of the time, and if there are discussions that you want to have, we could put it on the agenda under new business or what have you. More just on the first one, it came to my attention that there's a property owner that it has property between Ocean Ave and Zifla Road. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right or not, but there's a seawall. Zilpha. Thank you. There's a seawall, and come to find out that the seawall, part of it is on town property. So what we've done in the past is to put together, we've done this with the utility company, put together a license agreement to allow the two homeowners want to reconstruct the wall and make improvements to it, to do a license agreement to allow them to do it, and then to do an easement at town meeting at a subsequent date. So I did say to, they're represented by Attorney Kroll, that I would bring that to the board and then bring the form of a license agreement. If we were to do a license agreement for the value of the land or the value of the easement, we would need to get an appraisal and then go to town meeting, and then the homeowners would pay for the town property that they have their structure on. So I just wanted to kind of alert that he came to me and said that he being Bill Kroll, that they are interested in pursuing this as a course.
So your question, this is informational, and the
This is
question you have for us,
informational, But just, you
is
know,
there a
the-
sense on people want to bring this back in the license form? Is that your,
Yeah, we'll,
your ask?
we'll have the, we don't have the license agreement done, so once the license agreement gets drafted, bring
It'll
that
come
to
back.
the board. So this is really just a heads up of
Okay.
things that are coming. If for some reason you don't wanna allow them to reconstruct the wall, you know, then that would be, I guess, a different conversation. But I would rather just, you can reflect upon that,
Yeah.
and then we can put it on the agenda formally.
Okay.
The license agreement may be a week or two away, so timing-wise, I'll follow up. That's the first one. The Castle in the Clouds discussion. I guess I want to just preface this, I don't want to be in the middle of this. I got the school department is on one page saying that they would like, and they have brought people together and have submitted a plan to go to CPC to fund, to change out the playground and to do renovations to the park overall. I was asked to attend a meeting on the 24th at, I believe it's at, let me see if I have the time. I can send you the specific time. I believe it's in the morning on the 24th, to go look at the site with Scott Carpenter, a few people from the school. I probably will have Lynn Cooper join us. I did see Tina Games came in the office this afternoon. Monomoy has it on their agenda for the 24th to talk about what they want to do with it. The facility is a town asset. If they recommend to demolish it or take it down, and, you know, they may want me or may ask me to go to the insurance company to get the insurance company's input in terms of this. So, in terms of the policy decision of, is the board in favor of replacing it or not replacing it, I guess I'm kind of interested in, because I can certainly work with the insurance company either way. How do we limit the liability of the town in terms of that? But I'm just looking, I guess, for more direction for the board, and you can formally put that on for a discussion. The school is gonna have a meeting on the 24th to talk about it. So if the selectmen wanna have it formally on the agenda.
Michael, and
Absolutely. I think we should put this on the agenda for next week if we could. The two things that stick out to me, Chris, is you sent us a memo, and it was a liability memo, that you didn't want to be in the middle of it, and the board should take a position. Based on the safety audit and everything that I've heard, I would think that the school would shut the playground down and stop letting kids use it. And that's not our decision. That's they're a tenant. If they deem it unsafe, they should shut it down. So when are they going to make that decision? That's one question I have. And then the only other one would be, I looked at the plan that they submitted to CPC. Is there any thought in them coming before the Board of Selectmen that actually controls the land behind the middle school and asking if we're okay with their grand plan to do anything back there before they submit an application?
Yeah, great point.
Because we did draw a line,
We
and
did
we have
provide
that.
the line of control, or I
So,
can't remember the term of art.
I'll bring more of that up next week. I'm not saying I'm against it, but maybe they should ask us
yeah,
before we go any
Yeah.
further with this
Fair
application.
question.
It's a boundary line.
well, and
Either way.
so part of that discussion that I talked to, Chris and I, to Scott and to Tina last week, and I was concerned about two things. One was the safety issue, number one and foremost, because that's the liability, plus, forget liability, we're hurting kids at the
Right.
moment.
Right, we're hurting kids.
The second part that I was concerned about is that they had this grand plan, very expensive. And if they're going to go to CPC for this, my suggestion was they at least look at fixing the problem, the playground problem, and take that to CPC, and then look if they have something else going on later on, go back later. Because the dollar value they were talking about would have taken all the CPA funds we have. And we have other issues we're anxious for them to, affordable housing, you name it. So I think they're going back and looking at the phasing, so it makes, at least to me, it makes some sense. But Don, I know you had a lot of interest in this.
Yeah,
I'll give you-
I just wanted to start out by saying that I was the president of the organization that built it. There wasn't a single penny of it that came from state, federal, or local funds. It was all a volunteer organization. That being said, I also want to say Lynn Fox, Mary Clark, Adele Hooper, Pam Domos, and Penny Wasson were the primary fundraisers. So I was on the technical side. My background was I started off in the federal government, and I was actually the person who issued the schedule contracts for playgrounds. And there was significant activity, especially in the overseas military bases. They bought a lot of that equipment. I was involved in all of the spec'd out stuff. I ordered all of it that got ordered. There were a lot of us that were chasing after, Alice Norja was one of them, they were chasing after getting things volunteered to be donated to it. I got a bunch of things here. I'm really appalled that they never did any maintenance on it. I mean, any significant maintenance. It called for every year for that to be sanded and sealed. They're misquoting Robert S. Leathers here. Well, he's gone, but their architect, yeah, they're expected to get 20 years out of it, but they didn't tell you that they had somebody come in to actually review this particular playground. And they didn't give them the opportunity to submit a proposal to refurbish the playground either. They just decided that we're going to take it down, and this all preceded even the safety audit. I have somebody who went to a staff meeting where the principal actually said a year and a half ago, we are going to tear that thing down and rebuild it. And that was before all of the assessments. Having said that, I'm not surprised it's splintering because they've done nothing to sand it, they've done nothing to seal it, and I'm very concerned, and Michael's on target. They need to close this thing down. If they've done, they have put Exco ground cover on this thing. It's just wood chips now. It was designed with a proprietary material made out of wood. It was shredded. That was supposed to provide a kind of rubber-like surface to it. And it was called Fibar. They have never replenished it on their own, or they may have like 20 years ago, but the Playground Association gave them the last $6,500 about 5 years ago to replenish this. It is now loose material. It creates insects. It's not treated for that. It's not spec'd out for that. And it's all over the whole playground. I went there yesterday with a few people to look over the thing. And tearing down the whole playground is kind of a misnomer. There are about 7 different structures, including different swing sets that are completely separate from the towers. I would have started with Leathers and asked them, okay, what would it cost to upgrade this and tear out the parts that are no good? They didn't even send the guy a complimentary bid. I had spoken to their architect about 6 months ago, and Mary Aldag and Joy Jordan had me in a meeting there. They have not once talked to me since then, and yet I know how the whole thing is constructed. This is a runaway train.
Don, let me suggest that we bring this back as an agenda item. I think this will give Monomoy a chance to review where they're going with it. I think for us, if I'm understanding the conversation, we need a clear understanding where the boundaries are and what's our responsibility and what the school's responsibilities are.
We'll dig that up and put it in the packet.
Because then what they'll ask, if we know that, then our ask will be whether we support it or not going to CPC. So we need to understand all that. And we'll put it back. Let me get Ed, well, Steve, go ahead.
I think, CPC was surprised here too. They didn't realize that they were going to be asked for all this money. And it's not that CPC doesn't want to support a project like this, because they certainly do. But, there's a limit to the amount of money they have available. So a lot of assumptions were made.
Let me get that first, Michael. Ed?
I mean, it seems to me to be sort of 2 questions. One, about the playground, and 2, about the nature of this grand project that's been presented, which I don't see how it's possible to present a project for property that you don't have control over, which in my mind they clearly don't. And the other side of it, the questions about the playground facility, but is that we keep on sort of putting it towards Monomoy, but up until 6-7 years ago, that was us. I mean, it was for the time from it was built in 1995 until Monomoy was created. It was the town not doing the annual maintenance.
Oh, the school committee. It was
Well,
turned over to them.
I know, but but they needed to get their budget approved, and we always approved for maintenance
But that's,
money for them separately, as a separate article to ensure that things got done, and we overlooked getting the annual maintenance for this done.
Ed and Don, I guess, my point to both of you would be is that the past is the past. Right now,
Yeah,
we have to
I
be
know. That's the
concerned
point
about
I'm
whether,
trying
you
to
know, they
make.
didn't maintain it, they didn't insurances. I think my concern, and I think ours should be going forward. Michael?
My number one concern right now is safety first.
Yeah.
So,
Yep,
based on your memo, safety's first, and certainly, Ed, to respond to yours, it's still us.
Yeah.
They're our kids, it's still us. So,
Yeah.
the playground piece of this,
Yeah.
you know, when we dive into this, when we agenda it, we can have that discussion, but it's still us.
We'll press that, yeah.
24th is at 10 o'clock. 10
Okay.
o'clock, I promise. If anyone wants to join me, more than happy.
Boy,
How many, I see, Ed, have several people want to go. Chris, could you post that meeting for us?
Yes, I will.
And so we have more than, we have 3 or more, we'll be okay.
Public meeting?
Actually, it was intended just to be a walkthrough by the chairman of the, well, Scott Carpenter, myself, and a few of his staff.
But if
But
we
we can
posted, it would be a
We can
public
expand it, yeah.
Uh,
I will
you
do
have-
that.
You have a
Post
problem
it.
with that, Don? I think it's
No, I
okay
want
to
it to
do
be.
it.
I mean, if we post it,
We'll
it's a
post it.
public meeting.
If we have, there's several of you look like you're interested in doing it, so
Oh,
we're
yeah.
probably better off posting it. Okay,
Then the next two, the preliminary capital budget, I got some material in there so you guys could look at it. We just had the capital outlay committee meeting this afternoon, it didn't finish until 5:20. So what I'd like to do is I'll update the information. There was a few things that I missed that I need to make sure I get in there. So I'll have that update version. And then I gotta look at the budget calendar. I think that, you know, the final vote on the capital budget is in December. But you guys the selectmen wanted to have a preliminary look of the order of magnitude
do.
of the requests.
Yeah.
So I do wanna just kind of publicly thank the capital outlay committee did vote several of these already. So they are trying to give some direction to the selectmen in terms of their due diligence. But I will work on getting that and hopefully have that for the next meeting. They are meeting again I think their meeting also is on the 24th at 4 o'clock for the, so they want to make some adjustments. The one thing that they are looking at doing because of some of the changes that were made, that are contemplated to be made on the capital plan, that any changes in numbers in the out years, I'm going to try to identify those so that way we get the vote right for town meeting. I know it was passed last year, but it needs to go on the ballot for this year. But I think it's good to just assume that would be the case, so we'll make those observations of the changes to the plan, the capital plan for the out years. So that is the 24th at 4 o'clock is their next meeting. On the assumption on the budgets, I had found out, or had heard, that I did have some discussions with Carol, just on I know one of the primary focus was the short-term rental.
Yeah.
On the short-term rental, that money is coming in now, and that money comes in the form of a local receipt. So we just wanted to identify that. Mr. Chairman, I know you and Don attend the DHY meetings. It's interesting that the town of Dennis has made a decision to take some of that money that they're getting, the extra money, and putting about 25% towards the sewer program. So really, the point of the assumption was to try to get a sense for the order of magnitude for how much money is gonna be coming in from that as a resource.
Yeah. Chris,
and how we use it is.
my question about the assumption is, as far as I know, we haven't gotten a report from the state yet of money, of what do we know the amount of money coming in?
Well, yeah, what they do, Mr. Chairman, it was kind of interesting. They took the hotel motel statute and they amended it. So we get an amount of money that comes in from hotel motel. It's now expanded because the definition of hotel motel
Right.
has expanded. So I don't believe they've segmented off yet for us to tell us which is hotel motel and which is the short-term rental.
No, that's, yeah,
And they may not do that, so we need to look at the assumptions of the dollars coming in to see the order of magnitude of what that means.
okay.
And the whole point of bringing that up was just to say that that is something that is having an effect, bringing in more money on local receipts.
Michael?
But not related to changing from 4% to 6%. Just currently what's coming in, not assuming 4% to 6%.
Correct. Actually, the town of Dennis, and I don't mean to just, we have meetings with them, so I'm
Yeah.
more aware, they are contemplating doing a 4 to 6% change there too. I think we did put that into our budget assumptions just to see early on, is that something you want as a board to consider or not consider? So 4 to 6, that there are several towns on the Cape that are now considering that. I can't remember the exact number. I want to say it was like 15 towns before 4 had it, from 4 to 6 back in like 10 years ago. And now the remaining balance of 11 are considering in different forms.
Thank you.
And that concludes, actually, one last thing. Just on the CVEC contracts, I just as a plea, I do have the contracts downstairs. Liz Argo brought those by, you know. and
half hour's work.
Hopefully not a half hour.
Well,
I know, they're all.
And I got,
Let me ask this.
and I was contacted,
Morning be all right?
The morning would be fine.
Okay.
I know I got a call just from Crum Smith, the golf course, wanting us to sign
A
those
lot
in
of
a hurry.
anxious people to get those
Because
signed.
he wants to get the golf course going.
I do have a meeting in Yarmouth tomorrow afternoon, so my hope was if I can get enough signatures, I'll bring them over by noontime.
Okay.
And that concludes my comments this evening,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Don? Ed?
No.
Michael?
If we could get a status update on Bank Street Firehouse, when that's gonna be torn down. Some interested neighbors, they say that there's animals living in there. They wanna know if we're gonna relocate them or terminate them before we tear down the building so they don't run into their house.
We did do, just on that, we did do almost a 500-page report on all the environmental concerns. And I did ask Sean Libby to help me do a spec to actually remediate that before we demo it. But the idea, town meeting did vote to demo it, so that's the plan.
Yeah. Ed?
Not to confuse things, but this probably will. I know there's been another property in town that a group of neighbors have been long desiring to see it demolished, and that's the house at the foot of Doan Road,
Doan, yeah.
28. I know there's been several folks looking at that property, and every one of them can't seem to financially put together a project to warrant buying the property. So, I mean, if that remains the case, all the neighbors have to wait until it literally collapses and goes into the ground by its own
We can check
fruition.
on that.
Yeah, it just, it's probably been 3 or 4, maybe even more months, but I did ask, there was some interest, so I had the building official, building commissioner send letters, and I thought he had told me that the owner had a new owner lined up that obviously has probably fallen through. I'll get an update from Ray on status on that.
Is that it, Michael?
That's it.
Steve? Nothing.
Motion to adjourn? Or do you have something?
No.
Motion to adjourn?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.